you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one can take them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one can take them out of my Father's hand. The Father and I are one." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Happy Easter. Okay. Just checking. Today is the fourth Sunday of Easter, and it's also known as Good Shepherd Sunday, because each year on this particular Sunday, we reflect on the image of Jesus as a good shepherd who with love and devotion leads his flock. It's also the World Day of Prayer for the Vocations, so I humbly ask you today to pray for those religious, those permanent deacons and priests. Also pray for those that are going through formation and also those that are discerning God's call. The title pastor, it means shepherd. And a shepherd leads through his word and he leads through his example. He nurtures with kindness, corrects compassionately, and he also protects his flock from temptation and evil. These responsibilities don't just apply to every church leader, but to everyone in God's holy church. We've just heard a portion of the chapter of John's Holy Gospel, and it's chapter 10. And it's called the Good Shepherd Discourse because in that particular chapter, we heard last week and this week about the Good Shepherd. And this follows Jesus when he actually healed the man born blind and the rejection of the miracle by the Jewish authorities who questioned his authority to heal. Jesus responded to their challenge to his authority by calling himself the Good Shepherd, and he criticized the Pharisees and the other Jewish leaders for their lack of faith and their intolerable behavior. Today's gospel reading is an answer to the question, are you the Messiah? Even though we don't hear it in the readings today, if you sit there and think about it sometimes, you think, where did this 3-verse reading come from? Well, we didn't hear it, and what happens is that Jesus' answer today is, in essence, if you have to ask, you're not one of my sheep. And then what he does is he asserts his unity with the Father by saying, my Father and I are one. As you can imagine, that doesn't make the Jewish leaders too happy. At the conclusion of these words, John reports that the Jews intend to stone Jesus for blasphemy. But it's not his time yet, and he escapes arrest. And as we all know the story, this controversy between the Jewish authorities and Jesus will last until his death. As we progress through this liturgical year and we move away from Christ's resurrection, I think it's only right that we should not forget the Paschal mystery, which is Christ has died, Christ is risen, and Christ will come again. The historical Jesus, he's no longer with us, but Jesus is still our shepherd, and he's always going to be our shepherd. Now, Jesus makes himself known through the work of others. He makes himself known through the works of this church, and he makes himself known through you and I. Christ has no body but yours. He has no hands but yours. He has no feet but yours. Yours are the eyes through which Christ's compassion must look out over the world. Yours are the feet that he's to go out and do good, and yours are the hands with which he is to bless us now. people will come to know God if we do these things. And this wonderful prayer is attributed to St. Teresa of Avila. We are called to be shepherds of one another. We're called to be shepherds of one another within our own families, at work, amongst our friends. We're called to be shepherds for those that we do not know. We're called to be shepherds for those that we do not like. We're called to be shepherds for those who don't agree with us. We are called to be shepherds for those who live on the margin, and we're called to be shepherd on those who are the invisible of society. Just as Jesus shepherds us with patience, with mercy, and with love, we're called to be the same type of shepherd, and it's not out of obligation, but rather with open hearts. You may think that you have nothing to offer. You may think that you're weak of faith. You may think that you're not qualified. You may think that you're filled with doubt. You might have been hurt by the church. You may have been disappointed. But you're not alone. The truth is that the risen Christ hasn't gone anywhere. He's right here with us today. He holds us in the palms of our hands, in the palm of His hands. And He knows what's happening in our lives. And Jesus will give us His grace to help us, to support us. And Jesus' promises are even good when we are in doubt and when we are in despair. Jesus is here with us. He comes to contact with us in our individual prayer, in our communal prayer. He comes to us in the sacraments, especially the sacrament of reconciliation, and especially in the sacrament of Holy Eucharist. And if we keep our eyes and our ears and our hearts open in our experiences of daily life. Soren Kierkegaard pointed out what Jesus wants from us is not admiration. What Jesus wants from us is imitation. It's far easier to admire figures of great morality and great courage, because when you admire from a distance and you're not necessarily involved. It's far more difficult to walk in those types of people's shoes and attempt to do what they do. To admire Jesus without trying to change our lives does nothing for Jesus, and it does nothing for us. We imitate Jesus when we try to imitate His motivation to do the things that Jesus did for the same reasons that He did. We should pray to Jesus and ask Him to make us feel the way He felt when He was on earth. The more we become like Jesus in character, the more we live on earth the way that He did. Once upon a time, there was a blacksmith, and he worked very hard at his trade. And the day came for him to die, and an angel was sent to him, and much to the angel's surprise, he refused to go. He pleaded with the angel to make a case before God that he was the only blacksmith in the area, and it was time for all his neighbors to begin their planting and sowing, and he was needed. So the angel pleaded his case before God. He said the man didn't want to appear ungrateful, and he was glad to have a place in heaven, but could he put it off a while? And he was left. A couple of years later, the angel, he came back with the very same message. The Lord was willing and ready to share the fullness of the kingdom with him. Again, the man had reservations and said, "A neighbor of mine is seriously ill, and it's time for harvest. A number of us are trying to save his crops so his family won't become destitute. Please come back later." Off the angel went. Well, we got this pattern. Every time the angel showed up, guess what? The blacksmith had an excuse. Well, what happens is that it got to a point where he decided that it was time. So he prayed, "God, if you'd like, send your angel again. I'd be glad to come home now." And immediately, the angel appeared. The blacksmith said, "If you still want to take me home, I'm ready to live forever in heaven." The angel laughed, and he looked at the blacksmith and said, "Where do you think you've been all these years?" My brothers and sisters, we've been called to make heaven on earth. And if we heed Jesus, the Good Shepherd's call, we can look forward to eternal life with him. But because of Jesus' resurrection, our eternal life, it's already begun. And no one can take that from us but ourselves. So what makes us important? It's not who we are, it's not what we do, and it's not what we possess. It's rather whose we are. Who do we belong to? My brothers and sisters, the good news is that through Jesus, the Good Shepherd, we now belong to our Holy Father.